Greetings, Denver music aficionados. Today we have another exciting Denver-oriented music documentary. Today's subject is pretty gosh dang interesting. I'm talking about Mike Chappelle, one of the pioneers of Denver's early new wave and punk scene back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm not exactly sure what the first time was I heard Mike. I believe it was actually before I started my career in live music, around 2017 or 2018. He says he wasn't in Denver at that time, but maybe he had just stopped in or something, because I swear I had heard this guy, and something about his extremely interesting method of relaying ideas in a stream of consciousness format really stuck out to me amid the rest of the music. And also, of course, I could tell that this was a guy with a lot of experience under his belt. Mike Chappelle is comparable to a figure like Little Fyodor in that those in the know, in the loop, in the local Denver scene, will in an instant recognize Mike's trademark style of songwriting, but those outside Denver will have absolutely no idea what you're talking about if you bring up the name Mike Chappelle in casual conversation. Center the nuances and intricacies of living in an underappreciated scene like Denver. The really fascinating thing about Mike Chappelle is not only do I consider him one of my precursors, considering that what I produce is Denver New Wave, but Mike hasn't actually been in Denver from around 2000 to the late 2010s, so he missed out on a pretty large gap of Denver's progression from a relatively obscure, niche little roadside attraction into a pretty booming metropolis, all things considered. Denver certainly has changed since 2000, and Mike now finds himself in a pretty alien environment that's far beyond what he knew. And what's more, Denver's punk scene in the 1990s, one of the most interesting, influential scenes of the entire decade, has largely gone completely unnoticed. I read punk zines all the time from the 1990s, punk literature, punk documentaries, punk videos and stuff, and it seems that Denver had a huge chunk of that shit going on, but nobody remembers it for whatever reason. And I'm here to set the record straight because people need to know these important figures. They need to be immortalized into canon. They need to be carved into marble like Michelangelo. And that's what I, as an independent documentarian, filmmaker, and journalist, set out to do. Mike Chappelle is an interesting figure because a lot of his punk songs deal explicitly with conspiracy theories. Now, if you've watched my video on Inside Job, Netflix's garbage cartoon show about conspiracy theories, you'll know exactly how I feel about the commodification of conspiracy theory culture, which by its very nature is meant to be a very esoteric, underground, secretive thing. It's kind of like commodifying Wicca. It comes off as extremely poser and try-hard and cringe. Furthermore, I don't believe in mocking conspiracy theory culture. While I don't believe in any conspiracy theories myself because I'm an atheist, and atheists generally display rational skepticism in nearly every facet, I don't think there's anything wrong with conspiracy theories, provided they don't actually damage the human brain and you apply a modicum of skepticism when engaging with them. Not only are conspiracy theories a vital component of American folk culture and tradition, but I think there's something inherently necessary about conspiracy theories to the human psyche. Every once in a while we have to abandon rationality and engage with the absurd on its own terms. So that's what I aim to do today. Go down for a one-on-one interview with Mike Chappelle, record one of his songs, and relate to you the exciting story of one of Denver's unsung punk pioneers. For my interview with Mike Chappelle, I'm heading down to the Independence Institute, which is a right-wing libertarian think tank organization located on 17th Street, or maybe 16th Street, here in Denver, Colorado. Denver being as left-leaning and kombucha-chugging as it is, I can't imagine the Independence Institute has all had much impact or is taken too seriously on a local scale. Alright then, people, so I'm on my way down to the Independence Institute. It's a really nice, pleasant, rainy evening, and the Independence Institute happens to be on 16th Avenue, not 17th Avenue, 16th Avenue on Clarkson Street, which is just a bizarre location. I've never been to this place before, and it's a strange spot, but I'm a go to it, so here we go. Here it is, the Independence Institute, one of the most bizarre establishments in Denver, right next to the Church of Scientology downtown. You kind of have to wonder, how does this place exist in the middle of Denver? I'm worried that just by entering this place I'm gonna turn into Ariel Pink. But I'll do anything for the sake of responsible, ethical music journalism. Wow, would you look at this? It's founding father Thomas Jefferson here. Hey, Mr. Jefferson, what do you think about being outside this place? Does it align with your personal values? Oh, that's right, you can't talk because you're a statue. Well, have a nice day. Why isn't there anything on your Declaration of Independence? Shouldn't there be writing on that? Or are you just about to write it? I don't know. Wow. This is eerie right now. Just me out here with Tommy Jeffy getting rained on. I do think it's important to note that I don't really care about the personal politics of any musician. Like, I don't care that Aerosmith are Republicans, for instance. In the comments on my Ariel Pink video, some of you said that I just hated Ariel because he was red-pilled or based or whatever, is because of his politics. No, I don't just hate Ariel Pink because he's on the right. I hate him because his music sucks ass, and if he was on the left, I'd also think that his music sucks ass. His politics are largely irrelevant. I mean, he is an uninformed idiot, but besides that, his music is just really bad. I don't really care about the politics of anyone I interview or anyone I cover on this channel. That's completely besides the point. And from everything I've seen, Mike, despite his engaging with conspiracy theories, is a pretty level-headed, down-to-earth, extremely grounded guy, which these days in Denver is difficult to find. So I guess it's at the north entrance. Mike Chappelle has a group he calls the Chappelles, not to be confused with the Sharones or the Chiffons or any of those 1960s doo-wop girl groups. Down here?
Yep, right downstairs.
Okay. That's an interesting spot. Okay, so we are here with Mike Chappelle
At the Independence Institute.
How do you hope your music impacts the listener?
I hope that it informs the listener about maybe some things they don't know about. I hope it validates what they do know about. I hope that it encourages other songwriters, performers, if they're not thinking along political lines or connecting the dots kind of lines, that it inspires them to do that. Those are the main things. And I hope they like the songs just for the sheer joy of them.
What effect, if any, would you argue Denver has on the psyche?
Denver?
Yeah, as someone who's been here a while, or was here in the 80s, 90s, and today.
I mean, on my psyche it has a great impact. I love Denver. It's always been really good for me, to me. Lots of opportunities to do whatever I could think of creatively, whether it's write music or plays or organize events or things like that. So in that sense, the Denver community, there's a niche here for me and for people like me. So that's what I take from it. As a city, as a government and all that stuff, I mean, there's a lot of problems and there's a lot of connections to bad things like Palantir and CIA stuff, and there's a lot of homelessness and all that. So in that sense, it's like any other big city. It's damaging. But for me personally, it's been great. And for my friends, I think they have mixed feelings about it.
music is inherently fascinating simply by virtue of not being like any other music out there. Despite the fact that it's pretty hard to find on the internet. Mike says he's coming out with an EP or an LP sometime soon, and I hope it does come out because this stuff ought to be heard on the internet. Currently, if you search up Mike Chappelle, the only result is one Allen Ginsberg type song, which is actually on a channel that way back in the day was big into Ron Paul and posted a bunch about Ron Paul back during the 2012 presidential election, which I don't think Mike Chappelle runs. I think it's some other guy who just happened to post this one song by Mike Chappelle. But it's a bizarre little circumstance regardless, that this libertarian Ron Paul endorser happens to post the only Mike Chappelle song on YouTube.
The channel that Birdbrain is hosted on, Jeffersonian Alliance, is a really interesting little temporal artifact where this guy effectively loses his mind. There hasn't been a video posted to this channel in 7 years. I'm not sure exactly what it is that libertarians have for Thomas Jefferson, considering libertarianism wasn't really a concept back in Jefferson's day. I mean, sure, Jefferson might have argued for a smaller government overall, but surely there's a pretty wide gap between Jefferson's Democratic-Republican Party, which doesn't even exist anymore, and the current-day Libertarian Party. Here's a little excerpt from the video Americans, We Are All Sleepwalking in a Nightmare of Perpetual War and Fascist Consumerism, where this guy's camera sporadically zooms in and out on his face, and it goes about 2 frames per minute.
I was walking upstairs to go to bed at 4 in the morning after a late night editing things for my work, and I watched a little bit of Glenn Greenwald, who was speaking today, and the enormity of how our country has disappeared. It just weighed on me so much every day. I don't understand how we can all walk around anymore.
Do you have any music released on the internet?
I actually have something coming out in 2 weeks.
When you search Mike Chappelle on Google, only one song comes up. Birdbrain, is that yours?
Yeah, that was...
It was from an Allen Ginsberg type record.
Yeah, we did that in, I think, 1981.
It's on YouTube, but it's posted on like a Ron Paul fan channel from 2012.
Uh-huh.
You don't have any idea why?
I don't know how that works.
It's just an Allen Ginsberg song.
Yeah. Well,
he
he included that song in his CD box set of his greatest hits. And so that's out there.
What year was that Allen Ginsberg came out with his box set?
I don't know what year that came out. But the single came out in 1980, and that was through Wax Trax.
Birdbrains is a glue-on song.
It's a single first, yeah. It's a glue-on song, yeah.
Glue-on song.
Glue-on's with Allen Ginsberg. He wrote the lyrics, we wrote the music for it, and had like local people play on it and do the background vocals, the Birdbrain stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that was.
That's about the only glue-on song I can find on the internet. But
I got something to tell you, something to say. It's gonna sound crazy, because you know crazy as it seems, give or take. The longer you listen, the more sense it's gonna make.
what ideologies do you ascribe to? Any schools of thought, any particular philosophers you like? Any popular ideologies?
Well, that's tricky, and I had some that I really subscribed to, like, say, for instance, Noam Chomsky, on the left. Unfortunately, in the last 3 years, everything has, for me, flipped on its head. So things I believed in, things that I understood about history or politics, and who I trusted and who I don't trust, and that's all changed. So now I would say, yeah, that's about as best I can say. I don't have the same confidence in people that I once had confidence in. I more like look to, what I try to do is use the internet and podcasters and kind of triangulate between a number of them and compare what they're saying to each other and to what I think, and kind of work out my own philosophy and politics in that way.
Out of every text by Chomsky, what's your favorite?
Well, the one that pops in my head is Turning the Tide, which his book on Central America was written, I think, in the 80s, and it really shows what U.S. foreign policy has done in Central America over the decades, and so that's pretty good.
Right. The obvious answer would be manufacturing consent, but you think Turning
good.
the Tide.
Turning the Tide was before that. Turning the Tide focuses on Central America. Manufacturing Consent was what he wrote with Edward Herman. That was a lot. That's really important. I mean, that really is an important book, and yeah, that probably is more popular, and that's more general. Anyway, that's how the media is controlled and distorts information and misinforms us.
And those type themes make their way into your music a lot. The type themes in Manufacturing Consent make their way into your songs quite a bit.
Yeah, that makes its way into probably a lot of people's music. Mine especially. Yeah, I write about the media a little bit in there.
Right. Your favorite is Turning the Tide.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think so. That's the one I was just looking at. So
okay.
That's
sure.
Sometimes you have to directly seek media out instead of just assuming that it's going to be easily searchable on Google or YouTube. Sometimes the greatest secrets lie in direct engagement with life. And as a journalist, I understand that, but it seems a lot of my generation doesn't, and they'd rather be playing Fortnite. Mike Chappelle's music is almost hypnotic in the way it's structured, with backing tracks, and the way that he plays the guitar is really unlike anyone else playing the guitar that I've ever heard. I mean, everyone plays the guitar slightly differently, but the chords and the structure and just the overall feel you get with a Mike Chappelle song, if you ever have the opportunity to catch Mike live, is really, really unique and pretty stunning in terms of its complexity and its adherence to the punk ethos. You can listen to a Mike Chappelle song and you absolutely 100% hear the punk influences in there, and you feel like, wow, punk is still alive here in Denver.
In what ways has Denver's punk scene evolved over the years?
I'm not really capable of answering that, I don't think. So I was in the new wave. I know how it started.
Right. That's
so
what I'm
I started
referring
in
to
1980, and it was there were about 3 bands, I think, at that point, and we were just. I mean, I guess it broke in the before that in the 70s, and it reached Denver in 1980 when I was just getting started, and we were. There were, let's see, there was the Young Weasels, my band, the Glue-Ons, the Aviators, who were like the first 3, and we got to play. There was a niche for us, and we got to play every weekend, scrounge our rent and all that stuff. And that was for maybe a year and a half, and then it changed. Then we became the old guys, and then there was a whole new wave punk thing that happened. And
what year was that around?
I think that was around 81 or 82. Mm-hmm. And then I switched over myself into writing plays and performance art kind of stuff. I still dabbled in the music, I guess.
Yours was the Glue-Ons.
Mine was the Glue-Ons, and we were in 1980. We were together for maybe a year and a half, and it was pretty great for a while. I mean, people were looking for that music and that type of music, and it was more political as I understood it. Not everybody understood it that way. And so there was, we didn't have to do anything. People were looking for us. We didn't have to go scrounge gigs or anything like that. Or, I mean, we did put up flyers, but we didn't have to. People were looking, and it was a great time.
Well, I can imagine there was a massive demand for that kind of thing in Denver. Would you say punk really took off in Denver in 1980?
I would say so, yeah. Before that, I don't think there was one club that was doing it, and people wanted, at that point, covers, and they didn't want original music so much, and then suddenly they did.
That's the year punk came to Denver, because proto-punk has its roots in like the coast in the 70s, New York, LA.
England.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I first heard the Sex Pistols, that was like the first time I heard Elvis was hearing the Sex Pistols for the first time. They just cut through the sound, and it was powerful and stuff. That must have been 78, maybe I heard them.
Mike Chappelle doesn't only engage with outlandish conspiracy theories for the sake of cultivating a neat aesthetic. He also buys into several extremely level-headed policies, like the movement for freeing Julian Assange, who, as far as whistleblowers go, I really prefer to Edward Snowden. If you listen to Mike Chappelle's songs long enough, you really get the impression that Mike has a lifetime of experience, of direct experience with the world and all the strange personalities that inhabit it.
Ecological, certifiable language. Run this rock with invisible hands, trafficking children, harvesting organs, torturing Julian Assange. People looking for a smoking gun. All our lives we've been staring down.
What is the most insightful project you've ever worked on?
The most what project?
The most insightful project, a project that really stirs up and shakes the mind.
For me, I guess they all do in one way or another. So my songs, I mean, I was writing in 1980 songs like Comfort Me. It was about oil and computers taking over the food chain. It was like, I didn't realize how deep it was at the time, as now oil and computers are taking over the food chain in a bigger, deeper way. So that was writing those kinds of songs and doing that kind of research to write those kind of songs. That was really an eye-opening experience, plus reading Chomsky at the same time. So I was trying to translate what I was reading politically into the music I was doing. And then my play, Dr. Antonioni's Imaginary Disease in 1987, that was like a whole look into the medical profession. That was very impactful on my life and my understanding of how public health works, how medicine works, and how the latest round of public health scares, it gave me insights into what was going on and what I might want to say about it.
The first time we spoke in person, Mike felt the need to bring this musical up directly. Dr. Antonioni's Imaginary Disease. I'm not sure if it was a musical. Maybe it was just a Samuel Beckett-esque theater experience. I have a lot of old newspapers and circulars from Denver in the 1990s, and from what I can tell, the theater circuit in Denver was pretty big back then, pre-internet, and a lot of people found solace in theater, felt it was a vital mode of self-expression, and they could relay interesting messages through it. Mike Chappelle was one of those participants.
Here's an interesting snippet from the Denver Post. Americans tend to enjoy a love-hate relationship with professionals. We respect their expertise, but we deeply resent the control they have over our lives. While lawyers proudly garner the most hostility from the general public, doctors elicit the most suspicion. Most of us view doctors as the closest thing on earth to God, yet along with the awe come feelings of fear and anxiety. We worship them. but we don't quite trust them. This sick relationship between society and its physicians is the subject of Dr. Antonioni's Imaginary Disease, a one-man show being presented Friday evenings at Heatley's Tea House. In this quirky and perceptive monologue, call it a performance piece if you like, actor/writer Mike Chappelle greets the audience in the guise of Dr. Antonioni, a cynical and disillusioned member of the medical profession. Dr. Antonioni has come to tell us about a new disease he's invented. But before the startling facts are revealed, he provides a brief history of medicine that attempts to take some of the mystique out of the profession. He poses a brain teaser about Valium, the conditions it cures are identical to its side effects, and reminds us that the Bayer Company once marketed heroin as a therapeutic drug. He also informs us that some of the major advances in medicine, such as the supine position for giving birth, are the result of sadistic and greedy motives on the part of physicians. Yet the more he tries to debunk the profession, the more Dr. Antonioni aggrandizes it. After all, any group that can get away with what he describes must have enormous power over the public consciousness.
It's pretty surreal to be speaking directly to Dr. Antonioni all these decades later and not being able to see Dr. Antonioni's Imaginary Disease, the stage show, but being able to engage directly with him via communication and the power of video. Mike Chappelle's body of work in the punk sphere is undoubtedly giant. It's fantastic. There's so much material that this guy has worked on for the past decades that you won't actually be able to hear online, which is really proof, when you get right down to it, that the internet, despite all it's hyped up to be as an infinite repository of information, doesn't actually hold every band and group and song ever. That's simply impossible. Mike Chappelle is proof of that.
The barrel of wine, come find me, come find me, come find me.
What advice would you have for the Denver landscape going forward? So, in effect, how do you think Denver's musical climate could best be steered in the right direction for success?
Well, I think this is like a great time for writers, performers, poets, all that stuff. There's so much going on now. There's so much information out there. I compare it to what it was like for the 60s when Dylan and a little later John Lennon on his own and stuff like that were writing songs about what's going on and insight into it and feelings about it. So I would just say to the young writers, you know, like, the times are a-changing, and keep your eyes peeled. The chance may not come again, and do your research and work it into your songs, work it into your own personal feelings and emotions about things, and constantly be looking outside yourself, making those connections to how the world actually works, and write about it. People, I think, as things get crazier and the pressures to take away people's rights and all that happens, people will be, again, looking for community and connections, kind of like I thought happened in the 60s, and I thought almost happened in the 80s, and I hope this time it will happen for big time. Way up in war hearts, organized crime boss, the old lives, the old cons, banging the drums. It's a two-party. Become well read, like little Whitney Webb. Cast those two baby blue, green brown hazels on.
I think it's great that figures like Mike Chappelle, after leaving Denver for a lengthy period of time, are finally starting to return, reclaim the turf, and realize just what they missed out on. Because Denver is where it's frickin' happening. Denver is where it's at. And Denver certainly needs figures like Mike Chappelle. I would argue that figures like Mike Chappelle are vital to Denver's musical circuit, and I do hope that Mike Chappelle releases an LP, an EP, or something in the next couple years, because he needs more exposure. He really does.
Well, I would argue the key difference between the 60s and the 80s is that in terms of this cultural paradigm shift, there's a lot happening, but there aren't really any key players of the young generation like there were with Dylan or Mick Jones or figures like that. It seems for the most part that my generation is left to sort of subsist on the wisdom of older role models and figures and the like, which is a bit different from the 60s or 80s.
Yeah. I don't know anybody comparable to those people you mentioned happening now, which is, I mean, good and bad, I think. Those people had, you know, for instance, Dylan, he had a lot of insights, but he was also naive and short-sighted in some ways, and ended up getting the medal from Barack Obama, you know, who was, you know, another war criminal. So it's like, well, how did that happen? How did Dylan end up there? So yes, there was times, and Neil Young and all those people, that they had things to say, but I think the key for me now is local Denver people writing about what's happening in Denver and playing for each other live in person, face to face, with new songs they're thinking about, and discussing what's going on with their audience and with themselves and like that. There is that. It's not, as far as I know, you would know better than me, personalities, but that's all right. I think that's fine.
You'd argue that the future doesn't really need a focus on like individual martyrs or figures to kind of put in the center, provided that there's kind of a collective push towards artistic revolution.
I would think so. I mean, you know, Martin Luther King certainly was a powerful personality with a lot to say. But in terms of art and performance and music, yeah, I think it's. I mean, it'd be great if some famous person starts saying radical things and insightful things, and it's in their music, and that would be great. But you know, there's plenty for us to do here in Denver. And,
you'd say Denver's kind of a self-sustaining ecosystem, that even if there isn't the next big, huge, world-breaking pop act coming out of Denver, all that really matters is that Denver's kind of a closed container with interesting things going on in it that a select few are aware of.
I would say that's happening like that, yeah. But I would say I wouldn't count out something, you know, breaking from Denver. Some groups, you know, my friends Spiderland, Drew and Marie, they have a lot to say in their music. They're very professional. So I would say I wouldn't count that out, but not to count on it. Just take a step at a time and see what happens in the wide world, the big world, and what opportunities and responsibilities present themselves. One nation under blackmail. One more thing. In times like these, global medical mass murder.
You do have an EP coming out soon.
I do.
What's it called?
It's called Now Is Different, and it's with my band, which is me and my friend Henry Brez Rowland. He writes the music and does all the recording. I write the lyrics and sing them. And so, and the name of our collaboration is called Roller Coaster. So Roller Coaster has an EP coming out, the first EP, I think, in about 2 weeks. And at that point, I'll figure out how to use Spotify and Bandcamp and all that stuff.
2 weeks. Is this the first release since when?
Since 1987 or something like
So this is a really historically significant development here in terms
It's
of
really
Denver
historically significant, and we'll see what happens. But
Okay.
yeah. There's still hope. always a wonder when we assemble anything is possible. Tom Cruise met Emily. She said, you know what she said? I got 3 words for you. Ethan, come find me. Come find me. Come find me. You wake up.
Mike Chappelle deserves a lot of respect for his participation in history and his crafting of a unique and insightful mythos.
Well, that was a particularly bizarre scenario. So as it turns out, the Independence Institute just has a big old conference room down in the basement that they would just let Mike use, and the Libertarians meet every other week, but it was just Mike and one of his punk friends who he's making the new EP with, and he just had a good jam sesh and talked a bit about VHS and laser printers, and then it was pretty dang cool. Talking with these forefathers of the game is really insightful and brings a lot of depth to my life. Everyone watching this video, I highly recommend checking out the new EP once it drops. Now is Different from Roller Coaster, Mike Chappelle's little duo project. It sounds like it's going to be absolutely phenomenal, and I am really hyped to be here on the precipice of music history. The first Mike Chappelle release, the first official Mike Chappelle recording since 1987. And you heard it here first, folks. These are the sorts of scoops I get with my incisive music journalism, looking into the corners you don't normally witness. Thanks for watching, and remember, every view you give these videos is an ounce of support that helps the music scene here in Denver thrive and continue like a well-oiled, well-fattened, well-fed, greasy McSpoon machine. Mike is an extremely grounded, down-to-earth, level-headed, sane guy. I think that's the conclusion I've come away with from my meeting with him here tonight. I was a bit apprehensive because it was at the Independence Institute, but it's just some kind of libertarian think tank, and they have like a podcast studio. Mike told me about the Denver Turnverein, which is some kind of German facility that's right across the street, and how back in the 1980s and 90s that used to be sort of an interesting exclusive hangout spot that was used illegally by Mike and his group. Just a fascinating little tidbit of Denver history there. So I guess Mike is kind of just using the basement of the II as like a meeting spot, because they just rent out their conference room like something, but heck, I don't know. It's not exactly the type location that really sparks the mind and gets the crowds going into a fever pitch, but it's okay, I guess. It'd probably be more fitting for like a lecture or something. Mike sure is a cool guy, and I definitely recommend, like, if you're in the Denver area, see him live. Check him out live, because it's like an experience unlike any other, really. He goes into like this fugue trance state. It's wild.
Hopefully this video taught you a little bit about Mike Chappelle, and hopefully if you live in the Denver area, you'll come out and see Mike live sometime, because he really is a force to reckon with in Denver's musical landscape. Anyway, that's been it for this video. I really enjoy putting together these little music documentaries on important figures in Denver's climate. So if you want to be covered, just toss me an email. Let me know you're out there. Let me know what you're all about. Let me know what sets you apart from the crowd and why I should feature you. And until next time, there's been a little rockumentary type / documentary by yours truly, Nick Cicada, your roving music reporter. I'm out.